Great, really great to be back here again this year. How many of you came to Press Red last year? Marvellous. So awesome to have so many new faces. I hope you're finding this a really helpful day. I'm going to spend a few moments explaining what Naked Truth is all about, and then I'm going to introduce one of our team, Kat, who I'll interview for our kind of 15 minutes together. So very, very briefly then. I'd like you to imagine the 10 biggest cities in the UK. So obviously Manchester, Birmingham, London apparently is quite big, Glasgow, there's a whole bunch of them. Our 10 biggest cities, if you take the population of those 10 cities, it gets to around about 23 million people. Take that number, 23 million people, times it by 3. So we've kind of got over sort of 60, nearly 70 million people. That is the number of people that visit one porn site every single day. Just one site. That same site reported having 27 billion hits in a year. So I'm here to talk about pornography. And the reason I'm here to talk about it is because it's a massive issue. It's impacting so many of the people in our congregations and our communities. And so around 5 years ago, founded Naked Truth, which aims to do two things: to open eyes and free lives from the damaging impact of pornography. Open Eyes for us is education and awareness. We do that in lots of ways, whether that's in schools, and we have workers in schools helping young people understand the damaging impact that porn can have, working with parents, working with churches to try and help churches and leaders. All that fits under Open Eyes. And then Free Lives is the work we're doing to bring hope and help to those that are struggling with porn, and also those that they, families and their partners, which we'll touch on in a moment. I'm not going to say much more about it. What I have done, though, is brought this little sort of booklet that highlights some of the work we do, some of the kind of websites that kind of are there to help people. So just grab one of these. Maybe just because you want to find out about Parents Workshop and you'd like to know about that, or maybe because you are here as a small group leader and you know people who are struggling and you want to give them something. So this would be well worth grabbing at the end of the session. So one of the things we realised as we started to try and help those that struggle with porn use is that they are not the only people who are the kind of people who are impacted by porn. And obviously at a day like today, where we're thinking particularly about women, I guess there would be, if you talk about pornography, you might have already thought about those that are involved in the porn industry. The porn industry itself is mostly run by men who profiteer, often from the abuse and coercion of women within the industry. There's a huge amount of exploitation and coercion of women within the porn industry, without a doubt. But it's not even those women we're going to focus on in our kind of 10 minutes that we've got left. I want to talk about the women who are actually the partners and spouses of porn users. Now, one thing we do need to recognise is this, that actually this is not just a men's issue. It's not only men who are consumers of pornography. In fact, 1 in 3 visitors to porn sites are female. So when we talk about partners and spouses, that might be a man. But the majority still at the moment, certainly the ones that we're working with and supporting, are women, are the wives, are the girlfriends, are the partners of men who have become dependent on porn use. It has become a compulsive thing in their life. It's become a life-controlling thing for them. And as with all addiction, that leaves a huge amount of victims. The people who are the addict, but also those that care for the addicts and those who are involved in that sense as well. So maybe, just over a year ago, Kat Edrington, who you're about to meet, joined our team to pioneer and start our work with spouses and partners, which is called Wholehearted. So would you like to welcome Kat?
Yes.
I'm just going to ask Kat a couple of quick questions. Really, it's just a chance for her to talk about what she's doing and why it matters to her so much, which is a good job because I've got a cold and you don't want to hear my nasal tones for much longer. So, Kat, I mean, we started Wholehearted about a year ago, but this has been an issue that you've been really passionate about for a lot longer than a year. Can you tell the people here why is this so important? Why is it that we need to be doing something to support women, partners, and spouses?
Yeah, so I come to this issue with a personal experience of being the partner of a porn addict, a sex addict, a lust addict, whatever you want to call that, and having experienced the impact of that in a really significant way and felt what that feels like. And really struggled to find people who could understand that, and picked up some pretty horrific advice and counsel along the way. I started to explore that kind of more nationally, internationally. What's the experience of women who are dealing with this in their relationships? And along this journey, I became a Christian and became interested in, well, what are the church saying about this? And sadly, what I found was that a fair majority of that unwise counsel and terrible advice was coming from our church communities. And I found communities of women who were clinging together against the tide of some of this advice. So, I mean, my best piece of worst church advice I ever heard was, well, maybe if you just had more sex with your husband, then he wouldn't want to look at porn. And quite honestly, when you've just discovered that the man with whom you thought you had some shared values and who you had similar ideals has betrayed you, which is what it feels like, the very last thing you're probably going to want to do is go and be physically intimate and emotionally vulnerable with that guy in that way. And so God really placed in my heart an anger and a fire to see something change. And so I went off and I trained and sort of brought the professional angle to what we do also, and I hammered on the door of Naked Truth Project a few times before we decided, hey, let's actually start to address this issue.
You used a really important word there of kind of betrayal, and I know your training is in kind of betrayal trauma, and there are actually loads of the women who you working alongside and walking with are displaying the kind of not symptoms probably isn't the right word, but of trauma. Maybe you could just say a little bit about that, just so that people realise that this isn't just people who understandably might be upset and have hurt feelings. It's going much deeper than that. Perhaps you can help people understand that.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important piece in a culture that says porn's no big deal. And I was definitely made to feel when I started reaching out for help, maybe my problem was that I wasn't tolerant and liberal enough. Maybe my problem was that I just needed to loosen up, right? And so from that place, really struggling to find somebody who got where I was coming from. And I don't even think that's a Christian thing, actually. I think that women have been robbed of their voice to say, that's not okay in my relationship. I think generally speaking in society that's been a thing, and actually the research that's starting to come through now is corroborating that for a partner, as many as 70% in a recent study that was carried out met the criteria for a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. So that looks like flashbacks. That looks like memories seared into my consciousness of what I saw, what he said, all of those things. And compounded on top of that, you have this emotional abuse that we don't talk about. If you think we don't talk about porn, then we don't talk about the emotional abuse that comes with porn use even more. What that looks like for partners is lies. Can you imagine the person that you have loved and lived with and shared your vows and your life with lying to you every day for 25 years? And the longer you've been married, the longer that lying has gone on for and the more traumatic it is. So it looks like that. It looks like gaslighting, which might be a term that you are familiar with, which is the deliberate deconstruction of another person's sense of reality, which sounds like, no, I didn't look that up on the computer, even though there's only me and you here, and it's my computer. No, somebody else must have done that. To the point where some women start to question their own sanity, and they wonder, well, maybe did I look that up? I've actually heard women say, well, maybe it was me. And so there's a whole kind of range of stuff there. But I think we need to talk more about the trauma aspect of it, because there is a profound impact on a woman that is way bigger than most people would ever comprehend, I think.
And we haven't got long, so I don't want to mention much about this, but I think it's important we note it in the context of today. Certainly pornography not only has the accessibility changed, not only are so many more people accessing it in a way they didn't before, but the nature of pornography has changed as well. If you searched for porn through Google, you're not going to get kind of Samantha Fox, topless. You will actually see very violent, often quite aggressive videos and material. And again, there's another whole area there, isn't there, of within relationships even, where a porn user is acting out what they're seeing. And so actually, again, women are kind of feeling like either they can't say no, or even if they are saying no, that's not always being paid attention. Is there anything briefly you can mention about that?
Yeah, and I think I would add to that some of the spiritual abuse that we see as well. That for example, the theology of submission is one that I see being used against women where there is pornography in a relationship. Like, I don't have a voice because I'm called to submit to my husband. We don't often hear the other side of that, which is that we're talking about a mutual submission where the husband is called to love the wife as Christ loves the church. And so, there's a whole lot of stuff around that. And I think the intimate nature of the assault, it's an assault on my womanhood that my husband is accessing hundreds, and we are talking hundreds of other women and their body parts through the screen of our computer. And inevitably, I feel that at a deep level. I feel insecure, I feel not good enough, I feel not sexy enough, I feel like I have to do the stuff that he is looking at to be worthy. So I think there is a really big issue with feeling like I should, and also being coerced into acting out what is seen on the screen.
Yeah. So, is there hope and help then? I mean, I'm massively aware, even in this room, there will be people who will be relating to some of the things you're saying. Just statistically, that has to be the case. And also, of course, we're people here who care about what's happening in our community and our church. So you've been walking with hundreds of women. What have you seen in terms of some of the hope that can be found through Jesus, and also just through some of the program and support that people can access as well?
I've been hugely encouraged by the small communities of women that I've seen come together as they've started to deal with this issue. If you type it into Facebook, Partners of Porn Addicts, you'll find Facebook support groups, you'll find pages that are sharing articles about this stuff. So one of the first things that we did was set up just a peer support group on Facebook, and we have about 150 women in that group who have become like family to one another. That's a place where women tell me that they breathe a sigh of relief as somebody gets it. As they say, this is what I'm feeling and I feel like I'm going crazy, which is usually the first post that they post up. And 15 other women say, no, I felt that too. That's so important. And interestingly, we don't really kind of approach it from we're a Christian-only group. We have a large, probably a majority of Christians, which gives you some indication of how much difference there is inside of the church and outside of the church. But I see these women being Jesus to one another. We don't need to tell them God loves you. They see that these women who love God love them. They see that these women who love God will sit with them in the pain and in the despair. So I feel like what we're called to do, rather than to rush to the solution, actually what I have felt is that we're called to bind up the brokenhearted, to hold them together while they heal underneath. And that takes time. That is not it's all out in the open now, he's gone up for prayer, let's just forgive and forget, right? That's not the solution to this. The solution is long-term relationships with other people who get it. It's a safe place for women to talk about what it feels like.
Yeah, great. So we wanted to make you aware, really, that it's something that's happening in our churches, in our communities, that there are, if you remember the statistic right at the beginning, if we have just in one website being visited by billions of people every year, then that by nature is going to be, there are going to be billions of wives and partners and girlfriends who are suffering in different ways. So as we pray and as we seek to pray for women who are being abused and who are being oppressed, this is a group maybe you've not thought of, that you can begin to pray for and begin to reach out to. But also wanted you to be aware that there is hope and there is help for people, and that we do have programs in place that can support people. One of my favourite stories this year is a couple, a man who was struggling with addiction himself, and then his wife who started to get involved with Wholehearted and the work that Kat's doing and the programs and coaching groups that she runs and leads. And who became Christians this year because they found just what Kat was saying. They found that actually in that community that what was missing actually was something deeper, and that they needed something deeper, and that was Jesus. So we're seeing not only people find hope and healing, but also find Jesus as well, and that's so important, isn't it? But if you want to find out some more, please do just grab one of these as you leave, and Kat and I think will be involved in the panel as well if you want to ask some questions.